Hi there. This follows directly on from my discussion of Gnosticism, magic, and Thelema, the occult philosophy of Aleister Crowley. Um, I have to say that I studied Thelema for a long time, but I'm a very bad Thelemite. And my will is divided against itself pretty much all the time. And I overanalyze myself and react against this analytical process with bouts of over emotionality and hysteria, resulting in self harm and suicide attempts. And I've always suffered from depression all my life, really. Um, but so her will, divided against itself is a house that falls, which is divided against itself and is built on sand rather than rock. I have no motivation. I find it very difficult to motivate myself, and I always take on far too much at the same time. So there's no organisation there really. There's no management. There's just emotionality for the most part, and over analysis for the other part. So I used to know this guy actually. He was a fantastic wood carver, and he used to get his block of wood and he used to throw it around the studio and stamp on it and kick it and spit on it and smash it against the wall and get in a right state, and generally abuse this poor piece of wood for a long time in a sort of frenzy. And then he'd become very calm and he'd put the block of wood on the bench and start carving. And I've noticed that sometimes, I get so completely out of my head on hysteria but afterwards there's a sort of calmness. And so I'm wondering whether, in fact, pretty much everybody's will is divided against itself. But in order to unite this will, you have to reach a certain calmness. You have to transcend emotionality and intellectual analysis through some kind of aggression, some kind of belligerence, some kind of force, some kind of rage, some kind of well approach to disaster. You have to sort of go very near the edge in order to reach that sort of calmness from which the creativity arises. I mean, it doesn't always work like that. Sometimes it just is pure destructive force, really. But sometimes it can lead to great, to calmness before creation takes place, really. And what interests me, is that in some cosmologies they talk about chaos and darkness already pre-existing, and then some deity becomes its lord, and as if in order for the cosmology to unfold, the chaos and darkness has to be given an intelligence, if you like, which may have some kind of psychological metaphor attached to it. I'm not sure, but so I've never been a very good Thelemite, and I've never really understood what Thelema actually is, really. Well, at least from my own point of view, from my own life. You can understand something intellectually, but that really doesn't count for much if you can't really put the philosophy into practice. I don't really know where all this will is supposed to come from, really, all this undivided motivation and attention to detail and attention to excellence really comes from. And I don't know where it, in my case, where it goes to. Even if it starts off in embryonic form, it reaches, well, it stays in barren ground, let us say, But I don't, I've also been a great admirer of the philosophy of slack, which is the subgenius philosophy, the church of subgenius, because I think within a kind of letting go, there is a an education, a drawing out of something that lies within, really. But you do have to be able to read and write. I mean, if you're going to write poetry, it's hard to write poetry if you can't read and write. Hard to write music if you can't read and write music. Although people was a bit different because people have been writing music for thousands of years before music notation was invented. So, but you also were under a teacher who used to teach you rhythms and patterns of harmonies. Using instruments that were also created by the students. So it was all skills based. I mean, you can't just draw out something from somebody if there's no ground of skill for the plant to germinate in or plant to grow in. It just won't grow. There's nothing. Well, there's something there to draw out, but it's not going to go anywhere. So education is not just about drawing out; it's also about developing skill, so that the drawing out process means something. And unless you have those skills as a foundation, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to get yourself very frustrated and defensive and narcissistic even. Also self-loathing as well comes into it. So, so I've never been a very good Thelemite. I don't really understand quite where it all went wrong, but I've never been really connected to the earth either, or to the fire, but more connected to water and air, which is a bad combination really because because they're too undefined. They kind of just they do as they're told. They're kind of so they're so malleable. Do you know what I mean? And they don't have any will of their own, water and air. They just do what they just comply for a long time, and then they suddenly break out. It's like the person that's full of resentment for years on end, and he just gets a gun and starts shooting everybody down the street. It's that kind of a way, really. It's a weakness, a weak beam, as the I Ching puts it, and then it breaks, and then it becomes like a ferocious monster of violence as it breaks out of its own weakness, or tries to anyway. Um, but I suppose in the failure of becoming a Thelemite, at least it brings me to an understanding of Thelema. I mean, I know what's supposed to be. I know what's supposed to happen, even if it doesn't happen, in my case. But I think it also depends on the conditions, social conditions, environment, and genetics of a person, which does give rise to a certain amount of elitism as far as Thelema is concerned, because those who are born with it, who've got the X factor, have got to flaunt it, really. If you've got it, flaunt it, develop it. And well, you are just going to develop it. You've got the impetus of the universe behind you. So there's a kind of an elitism, that to the strong there is more strength given, and to the weak, such as they have, will be taken away from them, kind of thing, as it says in the Bible. So I'm not sure if I'm, well, in a sense, I'm not qualified to talk about Thelema much, really. Um, but its connection with Gnosis is interesting because Gnosis, Epiphany, Thelema, self-development are all concepts which are uniquely linked in a sort of mysterious way, and I think that's basically all that you can say.